You often think that, okay, if somebody's 10 years older than you, you've got to respect them. And that is true. I will not deny it. But if somebody is 10 years younger than you, they also need to be respected.
I remember when I made the switch and started out on my own, I put out the title saying CEO, and everyone was like, wow, you're CEO of your company. I said, yeah, because I can't write Chief Chaprasi, or a Chief Feud, because that's what I'm doing. I'm the one who's opening the shutter to my shop.
If you had to pick one leadership trait in a new GCC leader, what would it be? Without blinking an eyelid, he said, influencing without authority.
Right at the top, for the lack of a better word, because my mom already said it, it's usually the dinosaur generation. Usually. And that kind of does limit the extent of perspectives and the diversity of perspectives that come with.
Our generation is looking at experiences that they are gathering on a daily basis more than anything else. And that is success.
Entitled, lazy, too soft are some terms casually thrown around when describing Gen Z, the new and incoming generation. But what's interesting is I've heard similar terms thrown around when I was entering the workforce 2 decades ago. So is this just a generational clash, or is there more to the growing gap between generations? I decided to sit down with 2 professionals, both at different ends of the spectrum. We have Neerja Ganesh, a leadership development and a women's empowerment advocate, and a well-established TEDx and motivational speaker. And we have Sneha Ganesh, a young and upcoming tech professional, along with being a soft skills and communication trainer and also a TEDx speaker. Incidentally, they're also mother-daughter, and we will explore this intergenerational aspect a bit more with both of them. Thank you both for joining here, for being here.
I'm looking forward to this conversation, Lochin.
So we're gonna keep this conversation absolutely candid and hear from both sides. I'm gonna jump in straight into the first question. Okay? And let me start with you, Sneha, okay? How would you describe your relationship with work and what you think about everybody else, all other older generations at your workplace, or in general what you see at workplaces?
All right. So I think we'll probably start off with my relationship with work being maybe a little different to a lot of how I see folks my age behaving with work and having a relationship with work. And disclaimer, I have a slight productivity crisis, and that's probably what gets all of this going the way it does. But for me, anytime I do something, I purely do it with the intent of knowing that what I'm doing is going to impact somebody at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So my relationship with work has been and will always be something that's excessively passion driven. And I think anytime I do something, the most important thing that I look for is, okay, if I'm doing this, one, what part of me is getting satisfied? How much of me is actually going to jump inside saying, oh my God, yeah, I did this. And also just what am I doing, or who am I impacting with whatever little parts of in any capacity that I'm doing, there's got to be some end outcome. And that's kind of what describes my relationship with work the most. In terms of the way I see others, other generations with work, of course, we'll cover a lot of angles of this in the course of the conversation. But I think one thing that I very significantly see different is that I see a lot of the older generations specifically being very outcome driven. So if there is, say, 20 things that need to be done, they will assess saying, 20 has to be done. And with these 20, here's where I'm getting. And I will not do 21. I will not do 19. I will do 20 because I have to do 20. But on the other hand, I might not necessarily do 20 because I know I could achieve 20 with 10. So for me, it's that difference. And that's something I do notice a lot with the older generation.
Right. So the focus a little more on the process and, what was said and the structure, etc. A little more. Neerja, what about you?
So first I will give you an answer as a person, and then maybe generalize it to my generation, or
of course,
that kind of generation. So, okay, I don't look at work as a list of to-dos, KPIs, and hence salary increments and bonuses. I've never done that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I'm copying Sneha's answer, but I really look at the impact of my work. And I think largely in that era, in that generation, that's how we were looking at. Let me give you a story, right? So I once worked with a manager who used to sit on site. So what happened was, and this was very, very early days, right? There was nothing like this virtual thing. So he was on site, but he had to also be present in the local meetings. He had to kind of do a lot of work for which he was accountable to his manager. So what happened was, obviously, he asked me to represent him locally. So I used to sit in his meetings, and which meant that I was actually stretching. I was doing my role, and then I was doing his role also, is what I thought. I was sitting in his meetings, taking on those actions, delivering on those actions. So I kind of assumed I've stretched. I performed beyond my expectations. So come appraisal time, I was actually looking for a good rating, but he kind of gave me on target. Now, I'm a person who doesn't really fight it out at the appraisal table. Okay, you should have sorted this out much before, right? I mean, there's nothing you can't change at that discussion. So I said, okay, if this is what you think it is, but for next year, I want something better. So let's agree on KPIs right now. Give me some stretch KPIs so that if I perform that, then you know it's black and white that I've gone over and above.
Yeah.
So he said, Neerja, I'm not going to give you anything extra. But what I'll do is I'll tweak the metrics around what you already have. So say you have a customer satisfaction score, 8 out of 10 is say, performed beyond. I'll make it 9 out of 10 is performed beyond expectations. Staff satisfaction. You have all of these number games that you can measure. He just, said, I'm going to make it 1 more. So it's stretching you. And I told him, the quotes we used to call him, you think I'm going to do anything differently just because you made it a 9 or 10? Whether it was a 2 out of 10 is, going beyond expectations, or a 10 out of 10, I'm going to do what it is required to keep my customer happy, to keep my staff happy, right? So that's what I mean by I don't go by KPIs. So my relationship with work is what is the end impact that I would like to see with whoever, whether it is the not-for-profit foundation that I was running and we were impacting 5,000 girls, or whether it was for-profit entities and impacting customers. I think that's what my generation largely had. Now, if I had to give my 2 cents about the newer generation, I think largely people have a task approach. This is what you've asked me to do. I've done it. Now let me get going and, look at my life or something else. And a quick story here is, again, I'll take Sneha's story and she may talk about it some other time. When COVID hit, Sneha was all of 18 and just finishing her 12th, but she got onto an opportunity that Aspire for her, this platform, which was started just then, had come up with. They wanted student ambassadors. They wanted girls in the age group of 18 to 20 to become ambassadors for this platform, basically because they were serving this age group.
Right.
So ambassadors they were given daily tasks. So do this today so that, you are able to spread message. So they used to give very creative tasks, but it was a task. You could do it in 1 hour, 2 hours and end it for the day, right? There were 20 girls who were taken as ambassadors. And the 1 month period got over. All of them got a certificate. But 2 out of those 20, one was Sneha. They were so impressed with the way they did it that they said, you become part of our core team. Because they didn't take it as a task. And I think I've seen 15 such ambassador cohorts after that, where there used to be very exceptionally 1 or 2 people who went and took it as, I'm creating an impact for this community. So let me do what it takes to do it. But the rest were very task focused. So I think that's the difference. Generalizing, but yeah, beat me up for it, but that's what I've seen.
No, so I do agree with what you're saying, Neerja, because this is one thing I keep telling my team as well. And in fact, I remember saying this to one of my young interns who had joined us. I said, you know what? It is actually easier to stand out in this generation because everybody is just focused on doing what is being asked to them. But the minute you take up a little more and show up and take the ownership, which somewhere I felt like is also a little missing. My bias is there, but somewhere I felt is a bit missing. I always feel I was telling them, I said, all you have to do is do your job well and also show up for take the ownership of doing that well. So that's That's the only thing you need to do well. When we were probably coming in, we were competing because everybody was competing and nudging. And, if you got one project, the person is like, no, I will take 2 more projects. If you got like one stretch, they'll say, no, I'll take 2 stretches. I remember that was the mindset that I started work with. So there was a lot of general competition and hunger for doing more and visibility, etc. So Sneha, just quickly checking in with you. You said you're different from the rest of your generation. You feel you're different from other peers in your generation. Why do you feel so? What is the difference? What do you bring to the table? What do you see about yourself that's different, and what do you see with the rest of the, maybe a peer group which you don't do or they don't do?
All right. So I think, again, partially controversial, but I'm still going to say it. And I think one thing very specifically for me is that if I'm doing something, I make it a point to always over-deliver. Because anytime I'm working on something, for me, it's not just something that I gotta get done. I'm doing it because if I have my name associated with something saying, okay, this has been delivered by Sneha in any capacity, expect it to meet certain standards. Could be self-imposed standards if that's what it's got to be. But I genuinely feel like that is something that drives me to do a lot more than what most folks do at any task. Could be as simple as taking a picture for an Instagram story. I'm going to make sure that I find 14 different angles, even if we don't have 14 angles to take the picture in, because I want it to be the best picture I could take. And I think that kind of stands out across every little thing that I do, including at work, including, say, a LinkedIn post that I'm putting out, could be anything. That probably inherently also comes from a little bit of the way that I've been raised, because for most of the time, like I remember that when I was just starting off in school, and these competitions existed in school, and there were a whole variety of things. There was music, there was dance, there was art, there was origami, and as a kid who's just getting in and who does not really know what her skills are, my mom just said, do everything. It's okay, do everything. But she does not do everything. She said, even if you're not good, you will do your very best today. As I kept doing that, so I started like LKG or UKG when we had this. And by the time I got to grade 2, I kind of knew that my skill sets lay in XYZ. But despite that, I was participating in such diverse events and still winning prizes. And that was because I was tuned to over-deliver at everything that I did. And that's something I'm actually very grateful for, because even though it's made me a little bit of a perfectionist, and that's kind of problematic at times, I do feel like compared to most others around me who are just like, okay, fine, I've been told to do this. And I mean, if this is the bare minimum that I have to deliver, I will deliver it. And I will always say, if bare minimum is 10, I will do 10.5. Because I'm able to do 10.5. So I think that's a very stark difference, which I notice. And a lot of it has also just been instilled from a younger age.
No, that's fabulous. And I think, that's one thing I would like to say you and I have a bit in common in terms of doing everything in school. I remember once a teacher actually said, is there an event that you're not a part of? Because, every activity that was happening in school, somebody would come and say, okay, we need to practice for, dance, music, dramatics, basketball. There was nothing that was kind of left out. Whatever the school could offer as part of that.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you this, Nija, that you work with so many younger professionals as well, right? Both in your non-profit capacity as well as when you're doing programs and so on. So what's the one obvious gap and what's the one misconception that you notice, Nija?
I think committing and staying committed. I think this is a big thing for me, regardless of whichever generation. And probably as generations have changed, I think those levels are coming down. Committing to, okay, you've given me something and you may call it ownership, you can call it.
Correct.
But okay, so you asked me to do something, I'm committing to it and I'm going to stay committed, come what may, to be able to do this, deliver this. And the second one is keeping people updated. So there could be challenges. I'm not saying that, you have to be perfect and you will get, out as expected. But can you please let people know if, you are getting delayed or there is a challenge, there is an issue? Just keep people in the loop. So even communicating that there is no status or progress is communication, and you need to tell people, right? Just don't assume. So that I think is something which is diminishing. If I were to think of my days, I would never micromanage. As a leader, I didn't like to micromanage. And whenever I got into a new project or with a new team, I never micromanaged. I would give them, all the authority that was required to be given and say, okay, this is what I expect. These are the dates. Tell me what dates you can deliver by and let's work this way. And what would happen was, again generalizing, but largely when you're given that freedom and you're not checking on them every other day also, then they do what they feel like. And then 2 days before, 1 day before, or the customer will escalate is when I'll realize that, things are not going fine. So my going in stance was always that I trust you. I trust you to be committed and you will deliver and come back to me. If there are issues, I will support you through. That was my going in position. But the minute they failed me, then I would micromanage it to death and they would hate me for it. But I said, no, I gave you the opportunity, but you and they would hate me. I know that every day I would see them, either talking behind my backs or, making faces and all of that. But then it would take about 2-3 months for them to realize, why I was doing it, and they would get back on track. And then we would be the best of buddies, and I could see them scaling and growing and taking that ownership. So I usually put people out on the spot and make them down. That's been my style. So this was my way of doing it. I think that's definitely something which is a reality. The commitment levels of people is really going down.
It's going down. So, but is it also because of this whole lot of instant gratification that's happening, right? Like, for example, and my father would tell me that, he had to wait for some 7-8 years before he could get his scooter. I never had to wait for 7-8 years. I couldn't appreciate the wait and therefore the appreciation for the reward. And therefore in some ways, staying committed to something was viewed as normal because the reward would take time. So is it also to do a little bit with how, everything gets rewarded very quickly today, right? Like, so you're not waiting for anything. You're not waiting for food to be delivered. You're not waiting for results to be, you're not waiting. And sometimes when that's not what you see in personal life and getting translated at work takes a lot more time to translate into results. So is this something, my thought, but I just want to hear what could be the reason, or is this one of the reasons for commitment levels lowering down because patience levels are also kind of going down?
So, and I want to give 2 sides of the story here, right? So when I started out, I was this, of course, you can call me a dinosaur. I come from that era when computers just came in. All of us were going to NIITs to learn programming. Right. Of course, these jobs were, coming up with premium salaries. But, we invested a lot of money to learn programming languages. So we thought we're going to really build the next, app or product in today's language. Then it was programs. I started off with a job which was to do manual conversion. PL1, there was a language called PL1.
I remember.
Convert the PL1 code to COBOL code. COBOL was another language. All ancient languages, COBOL still exists. But which meant I read one line of PL1 code and there was a document which said, if this is the syntax, write it like this. This is what we did. I did this for 9 months. Now, after having spent so much of money, plus, kind of learning these programming languages, is this what I would do? I did it. And it has stood me, very well. That's what has taken me to where I am today, right? So if I were to kind of look at a few examples, that I've seen, like today, so many people come and say, hey, can you just refer my daughter or my, son for a job? Or, so many youngsters come and say, ma'am, you are so very well connected. Can you? And I make an attempt. I make an attempt to see what best I could do. So there are 2 stories. One of this girl who had done her MBA and she hadn't got a job. So I actually referred her to 2 places. One was in Mumbai and one was in Bangalore. And both places she got. However, she built up some story in her own head. Okay. And she rejected it.
Okay.
I was not informed. Which is the other thing. I was not informed. And I heard from the CEO of the company, because that's the level at which I'm connected. Then you are getting these jobs. And I heard from the CEO of the company, Neerja, she doesn't want to join is what she said. And there are no reasons stated. So I had to then go back to her father, because the father asked me, so what happened? And today's parents are also not able to kind of have those conversations, because today's kids are, I have to call you a kid, what to say? Today's kids are like, I know better. So that Similarly, there was this other boy who came to me and he said, I really have to be able to support my family financially now. He's graduated. He's looking to do his master's, but he has to support his family financially now. The way he wrote me the message, my heart was bleeding, right? I felt I had to really help this boy. So I got him an internship for 10,000 rupees a month. It's not big money, but 10,000 rupees is good money. You are staying with your parents, which means that you don't have to really fend for yourselves. This is good additional income. It's an internship for a few months and then you keep looking, right? But no, I don't want to do that. You will have zero money coming your way, but you will only go for things which are in your, mind. So that is the entitlement piece. And I will end it by saying that when I left my corporate, because this is not only about generations, let's talk about our generation when they do career transition.
Yeah.
Because Rochan, I know you've been in the space for so long.
Yeah.
Career transitions are almost like restarting, right?
Absolutely.
So when I quit after 25 years of corporate and I went on to head a not-for-profit foundation. Not-for-profits, you don't have too many people. I was the only person. Okay, because I was getting paid something, not a corporate salary, but decent salary. But I didn't have anybody. I had to do everything on my own.
Yeah.
So I used to tell my manager or the founder, except for making chai, because the chai wala used to come to chai, I did everything. Which meant that if I had to print something, I have to get up and go and get. I come from a 25 years of corporate setting where I had a nice cubicle. There were people who would make printouts. They would do everything.
Correct.
But here, I had to kind of learn from people who were half my age, who said, I don't think you can do this. And I had to keep my ego. So that entitlement piece, whether you as a child or whether you as a 25-year-old, you have to keep it aside because you are getting into something. You have to learn. And from there you go and reach where you have to reach.
Yeah, I agree. That part I completely agree. And I remember when I made the switch and started out on my own, I put out the title saying CEO and everyone was like, wow, you're CEO of your company. I said, yeah, because I can't write chief chaprasi, or a chief peon, because that's what I'm doing. I'm the one who's opening the shutter to my shop. I'm the one, and because I was working remotely, I said, I'm also the one who's making my own tea. So, no one's getting me this fabulous fancy tea and so on. So Sneha, coming to you and asking this question to you, right? So what Neerja mentioned was also a general sense of entitlement that is there of, I don't want to do this work and equivalent. And you also did mention that you do see, the difference that your peers typically maybe end up doing bare minimum or what's expected of them or asked of them. So one is, why do you feel that's the case? And when you may be interacting with them, is there something that they tell you saying, why they don't go above and beyond and so on? So I just want to understand what's going on in the mindset and if you have any insight into that.
Sure. So, I think before I actually jump into that, I think till now we've been delving into generation gap with more from the perspective of like mom's generation and my generation. But at times, like at least in today's generation, with the newer, I'm just going to say kids coming in, I feel like this is a lot more. And sometimes I genuinely have a crisis because, so I'm 23 and I work with a bunch of interns in my company now. And they're 2021. So it's technically not that big of a deal in the same generation. But like at times I come out of a meeting room and I'm just sitting and I'm like, that could not have been me. Like how? What is this generation gap? So I think there's, at least from what I've noticed and from what I'm hearing from people, I think it's the way people approach the idea of skills, which is what leads to a large amount of this difference. And I'll give you an example to talk about this. So like Mom was mentioning a little while ago, when I was, I started my career when I was about 18 and a half, 19, and COVID had just hit us. And I had the opportunity to be a part of this organization called Aspire for Her. And my role was fairly simple. I was doing the role of an ambassador. And what I was expected to do was to spread the word of the community that we were trying to build and get more people to join hands with us. And a fairly simple role. I had a bunch of tasks to tick off every day. And of course, me being me, I went above and beyond. And I then got onto the core team of the organization. Now that I was on the core team, in that course, I also realized that since we were an organization whose target audience was a fairly younger group, what would make the most sense was us to have an effective and engaging social media presence. And I brought this up to our founder and she said, sure, why don't you take it up? Now, by then I was also in university and I was studying. I'm an absolute math brain, and I was studying math, statistics, computer science. And I knew that I wanted to move into data analytics as my career. And I was going in that direction. Now, social media was completely not aligned to any of this. However, I still said, yes, why not? Let's do it. And I picked it up. I used to write content. Sometimes I actually make creatives. I used to make a post. I used to handle all of these things, figure out how hashtags work, how the algorithm works. And I did all of this. And in that course, I then went on to also take up a bunch more responsibility. From social media, I moved on to handling collaborations and alliances for the organization, where I used to connect with folks from other companies, talk to them about the work that we do, get them to have partnerships with us. And all of this was, again, giving me skills that at the moment I may not have realized. But today, when I look back on 2.5 years prior, what I do today is largely because of the kind of skills that I acquired in that period. However, I've noticed that, a lot of other people, especially in the newer generations coming up, they focus on skills. So they will say, okay, if this is what I need to do, get my job done, that's the skill I'm going to learn. And if the skill in any way does not necessarily align with the skills required for my job, then I'm not doing it. If my job is that of a coder, I'm going to learn the 5 coding languages that I need. And the mentality to look at things slightly broader, to say that, okay, I'm coding, but I'm coding for somebody. So bare minimum business understanding, communication is paramount. So that way of thinking is a little lesser, which I feel leads to a lot of this gap. Because honestly, the kind of skills that I was able to pick up in that course has helped develop me as an individual very holistically. And that gap in saying, okay, it's holistic development versus niche development, that's what is causing a lot of this. And again, it's starting with the very simple stuff like writing the right kind of emails. Commas and full stops and apostrophes. It's not that hard.
If nothing else, you have Grammarly for it. Please use it.
Or ChatGPT, but just change the words, because I can look at it and say it's ChatGPT. So, I think it's that way of looking at things differently, which is kind of what's causing this gap. And honestly, I feel like the idea of skills or upskilling has changed very drastically. And of course, in today's world, we're talking about the idea of skilling across, say, the T, or having enough breadth as well as depth of knowledge. But that is also being misinterpreted very gorgeously. Whereas people are saying, okay, fine, if I need to know Python to code, I will learn Python plus C++. So I will have a little bit along the horizontal, and I will have the rest along the vertical. But that's hardly ever the point, right? So from my interactions with folks from across a large number of generations, I think this is something that starkly stood out to me.
So, I'll ask you this, Sneha, first, and then, check in with Neerja as well. How should organizations then look at things like, performance reviews, right? And performance conversations? And because I think that's becoming one big ask. I do hear, my peer groups in larger organizations coming and saying, that person worked for 6 months and saying, hey, where is, let's say, my increment or promotion or whatever? And I did XYZ work, and, why am I not getting the kind of reward rating that I should be getting? And the fact that and there are, of course, some people who say the fact that I am showing up at work, right? And I'm doing what you're paying me to do, why is there a disconnect, and why am I getting feedback and so on? So therefore, what is the lens that you might want to look at, saying how should performance be rewarded? And of course, I'm not expecting you to give from an organizational lens answer, but even from an individual saying, okay, this is the way we would like performance to be rewarded or looked at. And, of course, then I'll check in with Neerja on what she thinks from an organizational lens.
So, for me personally, when I talk about a performance being rewarded, at least in today's generation, I think one thing that we look for, we're not looking at the large scale stuff. It starts with basic acknowledgement. And I think that is something that at times is lacking. To say that, okay, I'm glad that you did what you did. And a lot of times it's as simple as that. Because in a world that's as diverse today, and as multi-generational and intergenerational as it is today, I think it's paramount for everybody to acknowledge and realize that in our individual capabilities, we're all trying to do our best. And I do understand that because of societal conditioning to an extent, because the way we've been brought up, each one of us have different expectations and have different lens through which we're viewing what we're doing. But that cannot influence the way that you're judging somebody else's work. So I think the most important is just that, being a little more open to acknowledging that, okay, this may not have been the best that I would have done, but it's that person's best, so let's go and pat them on the back for that. I think it starts with that. And also just, I think on a broader level, when I think about it, usually performance reviews happens on, say, the large scale, when everyone's like, there is like a set of KPIs and things that each one, OKRs that each one's supposed to tick off. And if they do it, they do it. If they don't do it, then they're not rated well. That's kind of how it works. But all of this is a structure that's been put in place. And it's a structure that's existed for time immemorial now. And it's a structure that's often followed out and assessed at the top, right at the top. And right at the top, for the lack of a better word, because my mom already said it, it's usually the dinosaur generation. Usually. And that kind of does limit the extent of perspectives and the diversity of perspectives that comes in. Now, I do understand that there are leaders who are making a very conscious effort to understand across the board what the needs of people from other generations are and how we can support them to do their best. But unless and until this representation and voices of people from across all generations that you want to accept and work with, it gets a little difficult, because as open-minded as one wants to get, it's also important for you to actually get into the shoes of the other person to understand what they want and what they're actually looking for. So I think that openness to take a lot of input from the other generations while framing things for the other generations to be happy with, and for them to have their performance acknowledged, and for them to realize that yes, they're being valued for what they're doing, that won't come in till everyone's voice is heard. And that's something I do look forward to. But yes, I would still reiterate that the bare minimum is acknowledgement, non-judgmental acknowledgement of the fact that somebody decided to show up and give their very best, and they deserve to get a pat on the back.
This is very interesting, Jan. I remember, and I'm sure you would have had peers or bosses who had said, you have to earn the praise of the manager. So if the manager comes and says, job done, that like made your year, forget about your day, right? So that's all you're constantly looking at, and you would have managers who set very high benchmarks and said, no, this is not good enough. This is not good enough. And you need to do better. You need to do more. So how do you view this also from both as a leader as well as from an organization lens? And, like Sneha said, acknowledge us and say that, we've done or at least give us a pat on the back. That may be an expectation, but are we somewhere setting like wrong expectations? And that's a question that I'm coming from my own perspective too. Therefore, I'm putting that to you. So how do you see this, and what's your thoughts on it?
So the fact that things have not changed, performance review systems, formats have not changed from my era to, Sneha's, really says it all, right? People have not been able to find a different way to reward. And I think probably they are not looking at some of the research which has come in this space. And I want to talk about, you may have also read this book by Daniel Pink.
Yeah.
Where he says that most people believe that the best way to motivate is with rewards like money, so carrot and stick approach,
Correct.
Which is what appraisals are all about, right? I give you, you went beyond, or you did not meet.
Yeah.
And then it kind of translates into the money aspect. But that's a mistake. That's what Daniel Pink said many years ago, right? And he asserts that the secret to high performance and satisfaction, be it at work, be it at home, with kids or at school, is the human need to direct our own lives and not be directed. Okay, that's what he's saying. And so very quickly, there are 3 aspects he talks about. He says that people enjoy autonomy, self-directed, right? So I spoke about micromanagement. Nobody likes to be micromanaged. So can we move to outcome-based rather than how did you do it?
Yeah.
And when did you do it? Did you do it in office or outside or in the night or in the morning?
At night or in the morning.
The outcome is most important. The second he talks about is mastery, which is everyone enjoys getting better at stuff. So can we enable learning? So if you look at it, many companies have gone on to that 20% time where they say, do what you feel like, right? The Googles of the world, the best of the innovations have come when they allowed people to use that 20% of their time, which could be one day in a week, to do what you feel is required. So those fixes to certain tools or new tools have come not because somebody asked for it, but because of the inner desire. So I'm learning, I'm getting better, and I'm developing these things. That's why we have hackathons today. Right? Why are we asking everyone to, hack and, find new ways of doing things? The fact that we are in the open AI generation, everything is available and nobody is claiming mastery over it or money for it. Come on, it's available free. That's the, getting learning aspect and becoming a master. The third is purpose. He says, can you figure out or instill in everyone why are they doing it beyond the money and the rewards? So even, when I do programs, especially long-term, leadership development programs, my first module is purpose. If you don't know the why behind the organization, your team and yourself, I can teach you 100 things.
It won't move.
But it is not going to get you there, right? So this is what he said many years ago. So can we kind of try and build a system around this? Not around, okay, if you do much better, you'll get X% bonus more. But can I enable you through these? And then you see how it shoots up. And very recently, I heard Lalit Ahuja, the CEO of ANSR, who is helping build GCCs, and India is the hub of GCCs today. He was asked, if you had to pick one leadership trait in a new GCC leader, what would it be? Without blinking an eyelid, he said, influencing without authority.
Fabulous.
So which obviously means that, it's not about money. It's not about positional power. It is about other traits that you have in you because of which you can influence outcomes. So I think that is something, if we can just try and figure out, I think every generation will.
So, in fact, I was reading this other book called The Millennials, and that was written about 10 years ago. And I realized that a lot of aspects that were written then and was written from a lens of what is this generation? And nobody is able to figure out this generation. And I was laughing. I said, I was that generation. I was that unknown entity in some sense. Again, the conversation was coming back to saying that the whole reward mechanism is flawed. So we've been talking about this for the last, I can say at least 10, 15 years. Absolutely right. Like Sneha said, okay, it's from the dinosaur era. I'm seeing the same OKRs, KPIs coming in, and we are still talking about it, but we are not looking at it from a different lens. I was doing this session on performance conversations, and one of the persons actually said, when I'm working with my existing team members, old team members, I know how to handle them and I know how to work with them. But this newer generation, I don't know how to work with them. And when I probed in further, I realized, what she meant was that with them, I don't even need to give them feedback. I'm okay. Like they will keep doing whatever, and once in a while I'll say, good job done. But this newer generation is constantly looking at me and saying, is it okay? Is it not okay? Am I okay? Am I not okay? Am I doing fine? Am I not? And in some way, and she's like, and I'm not comfortable with it. But the fact is, and that's what I was saying, that the previous group or, maybe people generation older, you might be thinking that they're actually not looking at this, but they are. And they're probably they are also seeking that acknowledgement as well. But somehow they have gotten used to the fact that it'll not come through. Maybe because we were raised a certain way and therefore there is a little bit of a difference both in school and, at home. So I'm going to ask you I have two different questions. One is, do you feel that the definition of success and professionalism, and of course, recently there was this whole furore that happened where, somebody had written about how salary jobs are going to go away, right? So, and talking about more like micro entrepreneurs coming up. We were also talking on another episode around gig workers and that becoming a big piece, and therefore the construct of job security in some ways is also going. So how are you both viewing the change, or if at all there's a change in both the definition of success and professionalism? Because I think that's the second word is where there's a lot of friction that's happening, because what's professional to me, I will say, okay, but that's not a professional way to behave, and another one will say, no, but that is, right? So how are you viewing definition of success and professionalism for your respective peer group and yourself, and also for the others generation and their peer group? Whoever wants to take up the question.
Okay, Oliver. So, I think when I say definition of professionalism, for me, it does not have to follow set standard. So, I do know that when I do look at folks from other generation, there is often a set standard to say that X has to be 5, Y has to be 10, Z has to be 4, and that is professionalism. So, for me, professionalism does not follow those set standards. Having said that, professionalism for me is some very basic standard things that are imperative, that are non-negotiable. And it starts with a lot of value-based and behavioral traits, which is what I associate and believe with the most. Starting with respect, communication that does not in any way is non-judgmental, but also puts ego aside, and also being open-minded, having it in you to state what you have to state, but knowing that the person on the other end also deserves to be respected. And the reason I think I'm harping a lot more on this, because especially in an intergenerational workspace, you often think that, okay, if somebody's 10 years older than you, you gotta respect them. And that is true. I will not deny it. But if somebody is 10 years younger than you, they also need to be respected. As an individual, each and every one come with something that, I mean, if we're sitting at that table, we're sitting at that table because we brought something to the table. We're not just sitting there. So everybody's got to get that respect and value that they bring in. And when it comes to communication, I personally harp on this a lot also because I train on communication and I've seen people genuinely struggle with this. As simple as putting a message on Slack. Like, why can it not be written in a way where if somebody sent you that message, would you be okay with it? That's just how easy it is to think about it. So don't send something to somebody that you don't want them to send to you. So professionalism is this for me, and also empathy. Because especially in today's world, everybody comes from a background of their own that they may not want to talk about. Everybody has baggage of their own in limits that we never know. So choose to take a step back and choose to allow yourself to, in some capacity, step into their shoes and say, okay, if this is what's happened, don't just answer them immediately, but think about in professional context, how best can I handle this? So respect, kindness, being open to listen, being non-judgmental, not having ego, being empathetic. And yeah, I think this is majorly what professionalism as a construct is for me. It's not a rule book. It's not what people teach you in management classes. It's not any of those things. It's human qualities. It's attitude. It's value-based conduct.
Interesting. Okay. Neerja, your thoughts?
Okay, so I'll talk about success and then we can come to professionalism, because that aspect of security, job security, is just not there now.
Yeah,
right?
that's
All
gone.
of us understand that. I mean, forget the hires and fires, the layoffs, the org restructures. But the point is, even if all of that didn't happen, business and technology is changing like never before. And hence, I don't think you can really think of long term in this particular role and in this particular company. So I think everybody, and definitely the newer generation, is looking at experiences that they are gathering on a daily basis more than anything else. And that is success. If I was able to add a particular experience today, it could be just, okay, I went and, had something different, today at a meal time. That's an experience. And that's what is, for them equal to success than, say, we used to kind of talk about if you earn 10,000 rupees today, in 10 years, it becomes 20,000. So let's say.
Yeah.
That's where we started. My mother was very clear.
Yeah.
Okay. That's how she imbibed it in me, and we've continued. And of course, there are, people from the newer generation who are doing it. Sneha does that. But she's not going to think of every, 100 and 200 rupees like that. She's going to say it's okay if I am 20,000 rupees less after 10 years. But if I've gathered a set of experiences, that's worth so much for me. And that's how they are defining success today. So we need to start thinking of people like that, and how
Yeah.
do we ensure that we are able to enable them those experiences?
And maybe as an organization, how are we creating or at least part of their experiences like in a longer
Right.
term? Yeah.
Exactly. True. Yeah. Giving, say, 5-year completion, 10-year completion awards. We used to get a wristwatch, and then we used to get something. I remember a joke. When I finished 5 years at ANZ, I got a watch. So I was asking the then big boss, "What will I get when I finish 10 years?" And he said, "I'll give you a walking stick." But then they moved to a meal for the entire family. I think that's a beautiful one, right? How many watches will I need today? But that entire family going and celebrating this person's 5 years in an organization is so beautiful. So I think very simple things, but that's success. In terms of professionalism, whatever Sneha said, I think yes, treat people the way you would like to be treated is most important. And can we just think a little? I get so many messages where people say, "I got your number. Can I have 45 minutes of your time because I want to talk to you?" So I first say, "Can I have an agenda?" I'm happy to give you 45 minutes of time, but can we first understand what is on the agenda? Because today there is material available so much. I myself have generated video content like so much that before you come and take my 40 minutes, I will send you 3 videos. Take your time, listen to it. Many people come and say, "I want to become a speaker like you." Great. So I have a lot of content on that, and I sent it to them. And I said, "First go through this. Then we can have a conversation." After 2 weeks again, because they have seen me speaking at some stage, they said, "Neerja, I want an opportunity." I said, "Did you listen to that video?" They wouldn't have done that. So nobody is wanting to do their own homework. They're just expecting people to give it and, serve them. So yeah. And one last thing that I want to say is it is a gig economy. So let's accept it.
Yeah.
And all of us have so many different interests, passions, and skills. I think it is a must for all of us as an individual to look at gigs which are not conflict of interest with our parent organization for sure. Get a tick off from them. Let's have something going on in parallel. Because if you don't really get that hugely satisfying role in this organization at the moment, at least the gig is satisfying your soul.
Absolutely.
And hence you'll be a much happier person even at work. And you'll perform much better.
Yeah.
And organizations need to be able to say okay to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely.
Yeah,
And I think
quick
that's
point there.
yes, Sneha.
So again, definition of success, right? And I completely agree with whatever has been said. But I think the definition of success also, since especially we did say that job security by itself is a very difficult thing to think about, like it's very scary. So what actually success could be measured by is the extent of growth you've had. Because more than anything else, if you've noticed that 1 year ago you were at point A, and from point A, if you've even made an attempt to move to point B, you are moving towards success. So it does not necessarily have to be the change in role, the award, the promotion. That's not success. You as an individual finding yourself learning newer skills, building a brand and a standing for yourself that people start recognizing for you, finding yourself on a path to growth, ever that may be. And it's your circle of influence, your decisions, your path of growth. But as long as you see yourself walking on that, you're moving towards success. Success these days, I feel, is a lot more individually defined as opposed to something which in past generations was organizationally defined, saying if you attain X, you are successful. And in today's world, it's my X, and my X could be different from your X. So as long as you're walking to your X, you're all good.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. And I think, the piece that both of you kind of talked about of how you can make, have a larger, wider interest area and go beyond your current job in terms of picking up skill or having something on the side as well, because that's probably fulfilling. And all of these very interesting pieces. Some of these, we have covered in the book as well, and we talked about it on my book, Career Heist. We've talked about it also at length. And I really like the part, Sneha, where you said that definition of success is very individual today. And I think that's also the space where I would say my peer group is struggling with, because while they want to make their definition of success individual, they're still stuck in the organizational definition, right? So have I become a VP? Have I become a SVP? Am I making X salary? But at the same time, they also are like, but I'm not growing, I'm not learning, I'm doing the same thing. So it's a very interesting conflict space that we are at. And maybe that's something that we need to kind of look at and learn from you guys and see how we are defining that for ourselves and making that shift. With that, thank you so much, both of you, for being candid and sharing your perspectives. But I also want to ask Neerja this question, and this is specifically. So, Neerja, how do you think Sneha is different from when you were 22 years old? Or 23, sorry, when you were 23 years old versus how Sneha is at like 23? Do you see like a lot of difference in how you were and how she is?
Yeah, of course. She's very, very different because I was a very meek, timid, shy girl. And I think if there is one big difference, it's in the confidence levels. You know, I don't think, so obviously I was very meek, timid, shy at that age. And for 10 years after that, nobody believes it today, but yeah, that is how I was. And if people want to hear about my transitions, they can listen to my TEDx talk. It's not a plug, but we don't want to kind of, use that here.
Sure.
But the confidence level that Sneha has, and I don't know how she kind of has built herself to be that over the years. Maybe she can, answer that. A quick story was here also is around the same COVID years, 2020, 2021, I was asked to be, speaking at a virtual conference. It was a global conference, virtual, Kocharya's virtual conference. And the CEO, she first had told me I have to speak. And then because she'd kind of seen and met Sneha for something, he said, how about you both speak together? And we'd never done anything like this before, right? So I was like, for me, the confidence levels of will Sneha be able to speak? That itself was a big question. I went and told Sneha, this is what, Magda is saying, that both of us need to speak together. Sneha's like, let's do it. Whereas for me, that imposter syndrome and all of that, even today it exists. But the girl was like, let's do it. She's never done this before. She said, let's do it. So there is something, innate in her inside. And this is not only about speaking or professionally, even, in the home front. So I don't know which is, complementing the other, but I'll give this, it may be a very stupid example, but it is. So a few months ago, we'd gone to Coimbatore for a function at my sister-in-law's place. And, we had to put rangolis. And there is this powder rangoli we put, and there is this wet rangoli also. Mau kolam is in Tamil. And that's a little more difficult to put than the powder one. So Sneha puts the powder one very easily. And she's not done this wet one, I think. But my sister-in-law asked her, will you do this? Because everybody there was almost, like a generation beyond me. So for them to actually bend down and put this whole rangoli on the floor was going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And my generation, I don't know to make that rangoli. So, she asked me,
sorry.
will you do it? And Sneha said, I'll do it. And I was shocked. I said, what is this? For a function, she's asking me to do a rangoli. I mean, I would have thought, no, not me. I've never done it. None of that came. She said, I'll do it. She sat and she did it, not caring whether it's going to be perfect, most beautiful, best. And my mother-in-law kept telling her, expand it, you have to make it bigger. And she kept expanding it. And that is what I'm saying, the confidence to take on anything that comes your way. And then I'll figure it out. So what if it's a little messy? Next time it will be better. Way, way different to me.
Yeah. No, I think I remember talking to my team about this, and when we were thinking about this particular episode and the guests, etc. I said, that's one thing I noticed, and Sneha specifically, and a few other, girls, or I shouldn't say kids, I'm using that word, but few other professionals her age, is the fact that there is that there is that confidence of saying, okay, I'm going to try this out. I'm going to say yes, and so what if it's not perfect in some sense? I do see another group which is focused so much on being perfect that sometimes they kind of hold themselves back and they don't want to do it. But this is what I see a difference, because when telling this to somebody, I said, I was always considered to be a very confident and a very opinionated person, even when I started work. But even then there was hesitation. Even then, like you said, the imposter syndrome was there. I wouldn't, if somebody said, will you do it? I'll say, okay. Yeah. And then I'm asking myself how do these 10,000 questions saying, can you do it? Are you sure? And all of those happening. And that's what I could see the difference when, in her and a few other in this generation generally of saying, yeah, we can do it. And maybe it's also access to different things, but it's also the fact that confidence is what allows you to, be okay with failure, be okay with things not going your way, be okay with taking risks. And I think that's what is going to make a difference to how workplaces are going to be. So amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much to both of you. I loved this conversation. I did want to ask a little bit of gossipy pieces between the two of you, but I kept it professional. And I said, okay, I'm not going to unleash a mother in this episode in any form. But thank you once again for being here. It was an amazing conversation to have you both here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And I think we've been having these conversations for a while now. The mother-daughter duo has been doing it for a while, but every time we have this conversation, we still realize that there is such different perspectives, but also somewhere where it all aligns. And as intergeneration as it gets, now that we know that we're all working together. So I think just to have a lot more of these conversations, not just as mother-daughter, but just as professionals out there in the industry, and to let go of older biases, older perspectives, and be more open to listening to what both sides have to offer. I think that's very important.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you, both of you. And to all our listeners and audience out there, if you really like this episode, please go ahead, like and subscribe to the channel. And also please leave a comment so that we know what you think about this episode. So go ahead and do so. Thank you so much. And I will see you in the next episode. Thank you, both of you.
Thank you.